I just realised the first part was slightly in the dark because I didn't have the light on. So hopefully this is a bit better. Um, okay, back to garbage and landfill, and just an example. Again, examples are part of the credit answer in your final test. An example is a suggestion or a proposal for the largest landfill site on Earth, and it's out in a place called Tarneet, which, if you're not familiar with it, is just in the western suburbs, just out here. Just this is Ballarat Road, and the idea is that most of the garbage of Melbourne gets sent to this one central location. So it all gets processed or put in a big hole in the ground, basically. There. As a consequence, or as you can imagine, there's been a significant amount of protest to it, particularly by the people. Sorry, I'll just get this out of the way. I should have made it smaller. Particularly by the people that live, live near the area. They don't want it near their area because the trucks are noisy coming to and fro, and it stinks, basically. So it adversely affects human health. And so Stop the Tip campaign has been going on for a couple of years now, trying to stop it. This thing's proposed to be 13 stories high. Just to give you an idea, our building 511 is 3 stories high, so it's a lot of garbage. Well, in fact, it's all of Melbourne's garbage. The other problem from a CO2 point of view is it's suggested that most of the garbage from the other side of town, where most people live, gets transported across. So there's a lot of traffic of garbage trucks going across town to dump everything over in one central location. Part of the reason it's out here is because there's more space available than over here. There's not much land between the Dandenongs and the suburbs here now. So there's a bit more space out that way. It's next to a freeway, so it's good transport infrastructure to get it there, albeit it's busy. But this is, if you like, an example of the social consequences of landfill and people who have built homes in this area. This is a new estate as well. So imagine that you're building your first home, setting yourself up, having your family, and all of a sudden they put a big garbage tip next to you. Nobody wants the garbage, but we all want the products that we enjoy that end up being garbage. So it's a bit of that double standard once again, a bit like the street. If we look at the projections for garbage, or what they call peak garbage, they are suggesting that it's going to double by 2025. Now, double, that's from 2000, that base was. So from 3.5 million tonnes to 6 million tonnes per day around the world. And as you can see by the three projections, the three lines which represent the highest projection, lowest and mid, we're looking at 12. So from 2020, about here, in your lifetime, garbage is going to be an issue around the world. Hence the need to understand that garbage is part of the fashion industry and needs to be incorporated in your model. What do we do with garbage? Just another one I thought I'd throw in on the number of landfill sites within Victoria, and you'll notice that Victoria, with a population of about 6 million people, has 52 landfill sites, whilst New South Wales, with about 7 million people, almost the same, has double that. And Queensland, which has less people than Victoria, has 152 sites. What accounts for this disparity between landfill sites? Basically, size. So Victoria, by having 52 sites, is saying we want to have less sites but have them bigger. So that's one strategy to concentrate the garbage in one area, such as Tarneet, as I said before. Whereas in Queensland, their strategy is quite the opposite. They're saying, well, rather than put all the garbage in one single place, let's have smaller ones that are closer to the areas where the garbage is generated from. So you don't have to travel as far to dump your garbage, and the places, the landfill sites are smaller. Pros and cons to both of those arguments, but it's one strategy we could incorporate when we do throw our garbage away, do we want to go to these highly concentrated ones like Victoria, or do we want to go to these smaller local ones, such as in Queensland? See, there's lots of garbage that you can talk about. Okay, let's say we've dumped it, we've put it in a hole in the ground. We're less naive than we were in the past. We know that something happens in that hole, some process of decomposition occurs. And let's look at that process through these 4 images. Let's say we have a banana tree, and we pick the bananas and we eat them because they're a good source of potassium. So if you make sure you have a banana a day. Presumably we don't eat the skins, but we throw them away, and we throw them in a big heap in the ground, on the ground, excuse me. Given time and the right conditions, moisture, water, etc., that those banana peels will decompose and eventually end up like this: fertilizer, manure, or organic matter. Call it what you will. What do you do with it? You put it back on the plant, at the base of the plant, and that feeds the plant, which grows more bananas for next year. So this is a closed loop system, or a natural system, if you like, that can be repeated over and over. It is, in effect, a sustainable system. It's the Gaia hypothesis. It's how the Earth isn't just a banana tree over there or a pile of compost over here. It's actually all part of one system. Now, let's see what happens when we as humans get involved in this process. And still got the same process, but this time we're taking plastics and we want to throw them away. And so we extract oil from under the ground, under the sea. We turn it into things like plastic bottles, plastic bags, plastic buttons for our garments. When our customer has finished using it, they throw it away, and it gets put in the garbage with the banana peels. Let's say it's all in there together. Now, in that process of decomposition, as we know, the banana peels will decompose. The plastic won't decompose. It might fall apart. And if you recall, when we did plastics, we said it doesn't disappear. It just becomes smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, but they still exist. And then you still have this pile, depending on the balance between organic matter and inorganic or plastic matters, you'll still have this pile of fertilizer, if you like, but embedded in there, mixed in there, is going to be these plastic particles. And you put it back on the tree. The banana tree may grow, may not grow, it may grow slower than it would before, but you've now introduced plastics into the food cycle. And some of these are, I mean, there's pages of consequences of plastics in the human system. But just some examples, chemicals in plastics disfigure genitals, increase the risk of asthma in kids. It can kill the female libido, destroying our waterways, infiltrated food. We've talked about that before. Destroy the hormone balance in our bodies. And in short, you can't trust the plastic industry to tell you the truth. So we've got a real problem with plastics, and in particular, the Earth has a problem with plastics. If we apply the people with nature model to the plastics, if you like, once again, we extract resources from the Earth, whether it's cotton or other materials, to produce a garment. We wear that garment. When we've finished with it, we throw it away. It's all part of the social system. When we throw it away, it gets put back into the Earth system, and the Earth's natural cycle, such as the banana process, takes effect and decomposes the waste. However, because we've got these, what Johann Rockström called novel entities, plastic sits under novel entities, the Earth system doesn't process it quite as well, or disrupts that pre-plastic period, which was a period that was, well, more than 200,000 years that humans have been on Earth. Remember, plastics were only invented in the 1930s, so just on 100 years now, yet we've managed to contaminate the planet with these plastics. If we look at the decomposition rates of some of these items, cotton glove takes about 3 months if you throw it away or throw it on the ground to break down. Wool, 1 to 5 years, depending on how it's processed and if there's anything on the fibres, any treatment to the fibres, I should say. Leather shoes can take upwards of 40 years, and nylon, again, plastic base, 30 to 40 years. Rubber boots, the sole of the rubber boot is between 50 and 80 years for one pair of boots that you and I, again, might wear for 1 or 2 years, then throw it away, and then it takes 80 years for the earth to digest it or process it. So you can see there a clear example of not being sustainable. If we replace our boots every 2 years and it takes 80 years to process it, we're going to end up with Mr. Earth having indigestion. And that is the argument for those that say sustainability is a must if we are to live comfortably on this planet. I'll actually just go back to one point. I forgot to mention the buttons. Buttons are made out of plastic. However, there's an example of some brands that are using buttons made out of coconut husks. So coconut, we all might have coconut milk. What do you do with the shell of a coconut? You can reprocess it and turn it into a button, which will then biodegrade. There's also another nut. It's a Brazilian nut, I think, by memory. But that's an example of a solution. Make sure your garments don't have plastic buttons on them. They've just got buttons made out of an organic material that will decompose. It's not hard to do. It's a relatively simple component of a garment, not overly sophisticated. It's just that the fashion industry doesn't think of doing it. Or some brands do, but the major brands don't as yet. Okay, so what are some of the solutions then? Starting with methane. Remember we said methane was a problem. It contributes to climate change, one of the 9 planetary boundaries. Where does it come from? 11% of all methane comes from landfill. So you can, well, I'll talk about one way in which you can solve that problem. One is avoid clothes going into landfill, means you avoid methane. The other one I thought I'd just mention here, in 29%, which is the most significant, is enteric fermentation, which means flatulence of a cow. So this is one of the major contributors to climate change, is cows passing wind. And I mean, whilst it might be hard to believe, you've got to think what's happened to meat consumption. As a society develops, meat consumption increases dramatically. And the more demand there is for meat, the more need there is for cows. The more cows there are, the more methane emissions, as well as the fact that cows need land, need water as well. So that kicks into land system change. So even the diet that we take, and I know this is a bit of a side issue, even the diet that we have has an impact on climate change. And a simple reduction in meat consumption, for instance, can have a significant impact. But this is what they do out at Sunshine in the western suburbs. There's a landfill site just off Footscray Road, and here's the garbage here. So when you fill up a hole in the ground with garbage and you cover it over, as it decomposes, it emits gas, methane gas. So what they do is they sort of insert these pipes in there, they collect the gas and then burn it, and the gas generates electricity. So that's one way that you've created a problem, but then you solve it by generating electricity from methane as opposed from CO2 emissions. It's not a perfect solution because you're still generating this methane and contaminating the land around it, but at least you're sort of getting a few credits back by doing something good from a bad situation. So it stops the release of methane, it's climate change, and replaces electricity from coal because you're now getting it from methane that's being burnt creator. So that's one example. What does that mean for our brand? Well, perhaps we buy our electricity to run our retail stores from uh, this site here, the company that runs this power generation site. So you make a conscious decision as to where you buy your electricity from. The other question is, do we have to throw these items away that I mentioned before? Can we recycle them? Can you recycle? Well, I gave you the idea with swing tags before, but um, receipts, can you do anything with those? Hangers, perhaps use them again. I mean, use it again might mean having a facility for your retail stores to take hangers back from customers. That's all. Or welcome any hangers. So remember, a retail store doesn't have to be a one-way process where garments walk out the door with the customer. There can also be a place where you collect things for recycling, such as hangers. So that could be a solution. How would you set up a retail store that not only sells clothes but is also capable of collecting items for recycling? What would the process look like? And these bags that I mentioned before, is there anything else you can use them for? Can we use them more than once? Can we turn them into something else? Perhaps have a bag that's made of paper. I don't know. Can the customer take it home and then, I don't know, use their shopping in it? It might mean making it a stronger bag, a more durable bag that can be used to do grocery shopping with. And obviously our brand name's on it, so there's benefits to it. So it's about thinking of different ways in which we don't have to throw away some items. Okay, you're all familiar with Netflix and Uber. This is part of the share economy. And you got to remember, before Netflix, you would have had, you would remember because you're not that young, not that old, but not that young, DVDs. You still might have some at home. You used to go to a store, you would buy a DVD, a physical DVD, take it home, stick it in your machine, and watch a film. That's been replaced by Netflix, where you don't physically handle anything. You simply download data and you watch a film. There are no resources, no physical resources in the use of that. There is electricity, of course, but no DVDs, therefore no plastic that needs to be thrown away. So the fact that the industry has moved to this form of transporting information is a great benefit. Uber does the same thing. It's a share economy. So if you've got a car and an owner and they're sitting around, they're not doing anything, why not take that resource, that car, and use it for something else, such as driving someone around? So Uber, again, has taken advantage of the information age and said we've got the technology now which allows us to control and offer this service by means of mobile phones, internet, and various apps. So again, it's about thinking of fashion in the context of the information age. So some of the examples I'll give you now. Let's go through these ones, which I've got them up here somewhere. Okay, so here's a brand. Sell and buy luxury brands. So sorry, I should have this one up. Check these out. So these tend to be higher end brands and recycled, secondhand. So it's a Gucci top, used, very good condition, $1,000. So remembering this, the resale of garments isn't necessarily sustainable in the long term, but what it means is the resources extracted from the earth to make that garment, that Gucci top, can at least be shared by two people, if not three or four people in its lifetime. So at least more people are getting the benefit of that garment rather than one. Doesn't mean it won't get thrown away, but it extends it. So do we as a brand plug into this brand? Do we form an association and say, listen, if if any of our garments come up on your site, we'll give you a discount or we'll attach some sort of promotional campaign to it. Vinted is another one that does the same, ready to declutter your wardrobe. So they're picking up on the trend that consumers are feeling like they got too much stuff, too overcrowded. And now it's basically the eBay of clothing. And you put your clothes up for sale here as well. And I don't know if this one's going to have one. It might have. Where are we? Sometimes they've got a little story. I should have set one up beforehand. No. No, some of them have a little story. So you get to know the person as well who wore the item. So because clothing is such a personal experience, I just started to see little examples of this where obviously they're selling the item, but you're also to some extent selling the experience or the association with that item. Another one, Rent the Runway. What do you want? Here we go. And this is about renting clothes. So remember the share economy. Why do I have to buy clothes given I'm not going to wear them every day? And this usually brings up the reaction of, oh, yuck, it's not going to work. And obviously, for underwear, you wouldn't want to rent your underwear and then sort of hand them back and for the next person to rent them. But certainly, we have no problems renting for garments for weddings or for special occasions. It seems that there is potential for it to, where are we, to kick off as an option. And here we go. 4 items per month, $69 US, I assume. Yeah, this is US based. $100 for 8 items a month, and $80, 160 unlimited. Now, so you might think, okay, that's expensive, but compare that to what you buy, but also compare that to what you can actually shop for. If you have an unlimited range of garments to choose from, $160 a month is, what's that, $1,500 a year, but we're talking literally a whole range of clothes. So I should have this. Yeah. Come on. Oh, get lost. And I was going to see if there is sort by price. Okay, so these are garments. Look at this, retail $1,500, $1,400. So these are garments that for many people in the market they could never afford to wear, and all of a sudden, for 160 a month, you have access to these garments literally on a daily basis. You can wear what you want. So it certainly raises a potential of changing the whole target market and what that target market is prepared and can afford to buy. Remembering Zara turned the industry on its head when all of a sudden it started making fashionable clothing literally straight off the runway of Paris and London and made it affordable for the traditional Kmart Target customer. And Lena is a Dutch-based company which pretty much does the same thing. It's a library, pay as you borrow, so you borrow the garments as well. So check out these ones. These they're kind of niche. Well, certainly 5-6 years ago they were niche, but if you start seeing larger brands associate themselves with these sorts of companies, you might see some benefits occurring. So, point is, we don't have to throw the garment out immediately. We can put it back into the supply chain and allow another customer to use it. Upcycling then is there's a bit of a mix with the terminology here. It requires a product to be returned up the supply chain or back up the supply chain to be modified for further use. So this is where we take the garment that the customer's used and we're going to make some slight changes to it. In theory, a product can be held in perpetuity closed loop. Certainly if it's a knit, you knit it into a cardigan, you wear it, give it back, they pull it apart, re-knit it into another cardigan, and on and on and on it goes. And so if we look at some examples of that as well, starting with ASOS, reclaimed vintage range. So here's an example of a major brand. It's not well known, this sort of reclaimed vintage brand. Combines innovative design, vintage style across its collections.